You know, if you've got a teenager in the house, the digital world can feel like, well, like a minefield. Social media, AI, it just feels like there's a new worry every single day. But what if the way we've been told to handle it, all the monitoring, the constant arguments, what if that's all just wrong? What if there's a much better way? Today, we're going to explore a completely new way of thinking about digital parenting.
Now this is a big one. It comes from a landmark court case in California, and it completely reframes the problem. It suggests that the struggles our families are going through, they're not just about a kid's lack of self-control. It might actually be a direct result of how these platforms are designed.
And that verdict was a total game changer. I mean, for the very first time, a jury said that platforms could be held responsible not just for bad content, but for the system itself, the infinite scroll, the algorithms that decide what you see. It was this huge formal recognition that, yes, the way these things are built can actually be harmful to young people.
And look, the urgency here is just undeniable. The CDC is reporting that rates of sadness and hopelessness among teens are skyrocketing. The U.S. Surgeon General has issued an official warning about it. And yeah, lawmakers are talking about new rules, but that stuff moves at a snail's pace. The real problem is that families are in the middle of this crisis right now.
So this leaves parents feeling like they have to make an impossible choice. On one hand, you've got invasive spy apps that read messages and just completely shatter any sense of trust. And on the other hand, you just throw your hands up and offer no guidance at all. Let's be honest, neither of those really works, does it?
And this right here is exactly why that whole surveillance model is a bust. This quote from a teen named Harmony just says it all perfectly. All that monitoring doesn't actually make kids safer, it just makes them sneakier. When they feel like they're being spied on, they don't stop doing things. They just get a whole lot better at hiding them.
So that brings us to the million-dollar question. How do we find a better way? This is the exact problem that technologist and father Bill Cunningham decided to take on. See, after a whole career building these super complex systems for global finance, he looked around and realized our family tech, it just hasn't kept up with how people actually live.
So Cunningham's answer was to throw out the old playbook and start fresh with a new philosophy. He called it, simply, mentorship over monitoring. He gave this philosophy a name, ego genetics. And the name itself kind of tells the story, right? Ego for your sense of self, your identity, and genetics for that deep-down blueprint that shapes who you become. The whole idea is that your identity in this digital world should belong to you, not be some product for platforms to package up and sell.
Okay, so a philosophy is great, but how do you actually use it? Well, this big idea led directly to a real, practical tool. MyChoice is the very first product built on these egogenics principles, and it's designed from the ground up to be a family agreement platform, not a surveillance app.
All right, so how does it actually work in the real world? MyChoice uses this super simple three-step method that's all about collaboration. The goal is to turn confusing data into real family conversations. It's called See, Talk, Agree.
And it's this continuous loop. First, the family gets to see what's happening online, but in a way that really protects privacy. Second, they use those insights to talk, with a little help from some AI coaching. And finally, they agree on shared goals, together. So let's break each of those down.
So that first step C is so important. MyChoice looks at the metadata. Things like, are you scrolling late at night, or has your messaging volume suddenly spiked? It never ever shows the actual content of private messages. The key here is that parents are seeing patterns of behavior, not snooping on private conversations. Okay, next up is talk. And honestly, this is where the magic really happens. A parent or a teen can add their own context to the data they're seeing. So, for example, a parent could add a note like, hey, Judy mentioned she unfollowed some accounts. The second they do that, the AI coaching completely changes its advice. It goes from generic data to a real, meaningful, personal conversation.
And this is just a brilliant part of the design. The platform doesn't just dump raw data on you. It's a translator. It talks to parents in a way that helps them understand, and it talks to teens in a way that encourages them to think for themselves. So it's the exact same information, but it's framed in two totally different ways to build a bridge, not a wall.
And finally, we get to agree. This is where all that insight turns into real action. Based on what they saw and what they talked about, families actually create digital agreements together. And you'll notice these aren't just random rules. They're promises that are linked directly to the patterns they discovered. They're built together.
So what's the real payoff from this whole see, talk, agree method? Well, the big result is a huge shift away from top-down rules and toward shared promises.
And that right there is the key difference. The old parental controls are all about enforcement, about restricting things. This model, it's all about co-creation and building up trust. It's about empowering teens to actually own their digital habits, with their parents acting as mentors, not as monitors.
Let's look at a quick, real-world example from the platform's demo. So on March 11th, a user named Judy has this feed diversity score of just 22. That basically means an algorithm is running her life, telling her what to see. But then, after using MyChoice to talk with her mom, she takes action. And just 1 week later, her score shoots up to 82. Bam! She took back control of her own feed.
And here's the best part, the result. The platform gives her this positive reinforcement. It doesn't nag her about the low score before, it celebrates the progress. It says, hey, you're taking control. That kind of feedback loop is what actually builds healthy, lasting habits.
You know, when you zoom out, this whole mission is so much bigger than just fighting over screen time. It's really about helping families raise kids who can walk out into this incredibly complex digital world with actual awareness, with autonomy, and with the resilience to handle whatever comes their way.
And that really leaves us with this final thought to chew on. For so long, the whole debate has been about control. How do we lock things down? How do we restrict access? But maybe the real answer, the one that actually builds trust and makes our kids more capable, isn't about control at all. What if it's really all about starting a better conversation?